There's been a lot of reinvention because everyone loves being told a story, and I think there's been a lot of fractured narratives and parallel time frames, and there's been a lot of retelling of fairy tales in recent years, but sort of through a modern zeitgeisty prism. And what I love about this film is that, and perhaps what makes it contemporary, is that it's a very classic rendition of the story that we know and love. We all know that the prince and Cinderella get together in the end, and her kindness and goodness triumphs. But I think for the first time, in a way that I've never really understood in any storybook version, or even in the Disney classic from the 50s, is I understand what makes Cinderella tick, and hopefully what makes the stepmother tick, and why they are the way they are, and why they make the choices they make. And I think that psychology is quite contemporary, because I think we're interested in characters with depth, even in a storybook world. I was read a lot of fairy tales, and I certainly saw every animated everything that Disney has ever made. As a child, I loved them. But Cinderella was never a story that I urged my parents to tell me again and again. I loved Princess and the Pea. I loved, Snow White, Thumbelina, all of those ones. And ones, I suppose, where I felt that the characters went on a very big journey. And in a way, for me, this is the first time where Cinderella's not a passive doormat. And Lily gives such a beautiful performance. She's absolutely exquisite. She's heartbreaking, she's open-hearted, she's good, but she's not walked all over. And that she can't take it anymore, and she goes out of the house on a horse, and she meets someone who understands her, and she's heard. And I think that's a wonderful rhythmic thing that Ken has done in the film. It's enough then for her to be strong and resilient and go back and continue her mother and father's legacy. And she feels that she's keeping them alive. She's an orphan. She's keeping them alive by being good and kind and true. And he believed that his father loved the stepmother, and so she's trying to love her for him. And I think that that's a really beautiful thing. And I mean, Ken has said over and over, but I think it's a wonderful takeout, is that it's the kindness as a superpower. And in today's world, if someone is kind and open and generous, there's a sense that, they're a pushover. And I think that, any child who sees this film, whether they're a boy or a girl, who thinks, well, no, I'm going to deal with any cruelty, any bullying I face with kindness and goodness and pity, I think that's a wonderful thing to take away from the film. It was a wonderful process, actually, for me. I mean, Sandy Powell's a genius. That's end of story. It's quite simple. She's a genius with colour. She's a genius with shape. She's incredibly bold and theatrical. But there's a real subtle psychology going on in the offers that she makes visually for an actor to inhabit the silhouettes that she designs. But on one hand, we're talking about psychology with Ken, but in the costume fittings, and with Morag, who did my hair and makeup, and Kay Giorgio did the hair, the four of us nattering away about how the stepmother would look. It was great to know I was wearing green in this scene. Now that says it all. And so you don't need to act that. And so in those costume fittings, I began to get a real sense of how I could maybe perform. And I love camera tests and costume fittings because, in a way, it's a very creative time, because you literally get to start to inhabit the character's shoes. Well, this is what the costume is. What if we wear that in that scene? And so it was a really collaborative relationship that, and I've had the good fortune of working with Sandy a few times now. And, every time it just gets better and better and better. I mean, that was what intrigued me, is why, in the screen time that I had, what makes someone ugly? What makes someone evil? and particularly someone, you know, who was dressed as in such a gorgeous, sumptuous way by Sandy Powell, you know, as the stepmother is. It's not about the exterior, it's about the bitterness and resentment and jealousy, and so hopefully increasingly as the stepmother goes along in the journey in the film, that she starts to become ugly, like physically. I'm always interested, you know, when someone looks exquisite and then they start to eat and you think, oh my God, you're so graceless. Or they get up from the table and they've got an ungainly walk. And for me, it was the stepmother's laugh. I thought it's such an awful, bawdy, horrible laugh that comes out of someone with quite an exquisite sort of seemingly graceful exterior. And hopefully as the because I haven't got a lot of screen time and you wanted to go on a little bit of a journey, hopefully she becomes increasingly hard and ugly. And so I thought, well, I'll start as good and sweet and kind as possible in the beginning, so that there's somewhere to go. But a lot of that's in the script and in discussion with Ken and obviously working with the other actors.